There are 4 words that end most sales objections without a fight. I'll give them to you in this video, but before I do, you need to know why every objection handling course you've ever taken is teaching you to do the wrong thing. A buyer pushes back, says the price is too high, or maybe the timing is off, or they need to think about it. Most reps go straight into defense mode and start running through whatever rebuttals they've memorized. The top 1% don't do any of that. They say 4 words and then they go quiet. What happens next is the part that took me years to fully understand. I've spent 27 years working with sales teams across medical device, biotech, and finance, helping reps close $50 million accounts and growing an Amazon account over $9 billion. The pattern I see in the very best ones is something almost nobody talks about. They treat objections as information, not as obstacles. And once you make that shift, your close rate moves in a way that feels almost unfamiliar. Let me explain what I mean. Most sales training is built on a bad assumption. The assumption that an objection is a wall and it's your job to break through it. So you memorize rebuttals, you practice 17 ways to handle it's too expensive, you learn to feel, felt, found method, you study how to reframe price as an investment, and you build a mental script for every type of pushback you can think of. This is one of the most exhausting and least effective things you can do on a sales call. Here's why. When a buyer raises an objection, most of the time they're not telling you the actual problem. They're giving you the first thing that comes to their mind, the autopilot answer. Same way you say good when people ask you how you're doing, even when you're stressed or exhausted or dreading the rest of your week. Good isn't information, it's a reflex. When buyers say it's too expensive, that's a reflex too. The price might genuinely be the issue, or they don't see the value, or they're not actually the decision maker, and they need a polite excuse to not move forward, or they don't trust you yet, or their boss shot down a different vendor last week, and now they're nervous about bringing up another contract. If you start defending the price the second you hear the objection, you're answering a question the buyer didn't actually ask. So here are the 4 words top reps use. Help me understand that. That's it, 4 words. You say it calmly, you say it like you genuinely want to know, you don't follow up immediately with another question, you just let it sit there in the air. What happens next is where the magic is. About a third of the time, the buyer realizes they don't actually have a strong reason behind what they just said. They start to articulate the objection, and as they're talking, they back it off on their own. You've seen this happen before, right? Someone starts explaining their position, and halfway through they say something like, well, I guess it's not really that big of a deal. That's basically the act of explaining that forces them to confront whether the objection actually holds water. Most don't. Another third of the time, they give you the real reason, the actual thing under the surface. Now you're solving the right problem instead of wasting energy on the wrong one. The last third, they double down and the objection holds up. That's useful too, because now you know it's real, structural concern. You can address it directly, or you can decide whether the deal is even worth your time. Now here's the part that's going to bother you. Most reps will hear this advice, agree that it's smart, and then never actually do it on a call, because there's something deeply uncomfortable about asking a buyer to clarify their own objection. It feels passive, like you've handed the wheel back to the buyer instead of being in control. The opposite is actually true. Asking that question is one of the most powerful moves you can make in a call. Not because it's clever, but because it forces honesty into a conversation that was about to slip into theater. And most sales calls are theater. The rep performs, the buyer performs back, no one is saying what they actually mean. The deal closes or it doesn't, and nobody really knows why. A great salesperson breaks theater. The easiest way to break it is to refuse to play along when someone hands you a vague objection. You don't argue with it, and you don't accept it as final either. You ask them to be specific about it, whether they mean it, and you give them space to actually answer it. This connects to a bigger idea that took me a long time to fully appreciate. The goal of sales conversations isn't persuasion, it's information. The rep with the best information wins almost every time. When you treat objections as walls, you're treating the conversation as a fight. You're trying to overpower someone else's resistance. That's exhausting, and the buyers can feel it, and it makes them dig in harder. When you treat objections as information, you're treating the conversation as a search. You're trying to find out what's actually true under the polite version of the conversation. Buyers can feel that approach too, and it builds trust faster than any pitch you could put together. Help Me Understand That is a tool that lets you run the search instead of the fight. You can use it on almost any objection, but the way you use it matters. You don't say it like a robot. You don't lean on it after every single thing the buyer says. You don't turn it into an interrogation. You say it like you actually mean it, because if you're paying attention, you do mean it. There's almost always a gap between what a buyer says and what they're really thinking, and your job is to close that gap with as little friction as possible. If they say the price is too high, help me understand that. Get you to whether it's really about price. If they say they need to talk to their team, it tells you whether the team is real or it's a polite stall. If they say the timing isn't right, it opens up what would have to be true for the timing to work. You don't need a Rolodex of rebuttals. You need one calm question that opens the door to what's actually going on. If you run a sales team where reps are working hard, but the forecast keeps shifting, where the activity is high, but the big deals keep slipping, the issue is almost never effort. It's that information is on the table during the conversation, your team is missing it. That's what I help organizations fix. If you've got strategic accounts that drive most of your revenue and you want a system that actually protects and grows them instead of just generating busy work, book a call with me. The link is in the description below. We'll look at where your accounts are leaking and what it would take to lock them down. And if you want to know the 6 essential skills that every strategic account manager needs, watch this video right here.